Welcome to the Joe Kilgallon Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Kilgallon. If you're listening to this, I can't even talk. I'm sorry. This is gonna be a tough episode for me. If you're listening to this podcast for the very first time, this is not the episode for you, to say the least. Go back and listen to previous episodes of the podcast. I'm coming off a couple weeks off here, and it's a comedy podcast. I'm a stand-up comedian who travels across America doing stand-up, based out of Chicago. And so basically the concept of the podcast, again, this is strictly for first-time listeners, is to just shoot the shit with you. Basically all the conversations you'd have with your friends at the bar or pub, that's what I like to recreate here. And this episode was one that was going to be tough to make because, I never wanted to make it, of course. But my father passed away on January 27th. I'm recording this on Wednesday, February 16th. I needed time. I needed a few weeks off. It's been the worst period of my life, by far. It's just such a gut punch. We didn't see it coming. So I'm gonna talk about my dad on this one. If you guys are like, shit, damn, Joe, we come to your podcast for a good time, for a laugh. It's just not, this isn't going to be the one. I'm going to share some fun stories about my dad. So maybe you guys will get a kick out of those. But if I had done this episode, again, sorry for everyone who, listens if you listen every week and you're used to it every week and then, it went away. This is why it went away. I found out my dad passed away on a Thursday morning, January 27th. And, that's going to be my least favorite day forever. January 27th. Are you listening, you piece of shit? He wasn't sick. This was just, he went peacefully into sleep, although that leads to the question. People always say, if you die in your sleep, you went peacefully in your sleep. We don't know what death's like. We don't know if that's peaceful unless you're staring at the person all night long. You're watching someone sleep and then you see the moment, the machine just goes off. We see TV shows like Grey's Anatomy, and then the fucking thing just flatlines, and then you don't see the person in too much agony, I guess. But I guess that's where I take solace. Is that the word? My dad would not have been one of those people who would have been good in a battling cancer situation. Not that he wouldn't have battled, but he would have hated that. He would have hated going through chemo and the agony and all that kind of shit, not fully being himself. I could say confidently that the last week or so of my dad's life was great for him. It was. I saw him less than 2 days before. He died sometime early Thursday morning. Could have been 4 a.m. for all we know, 3 a.m., 2 a.m. And I saw him Tuesday afternoon. He came over to the house because he told my son, hey, when I come back from Florida. That's the thing too. He was in Florida for his golf trip. He's got his younger brother. My Uncle Paul lives in Boca Raton, Florida. And every year my dad and his two other brothers, they go down to play golf for a week and hang out in Florida, get away from the Chicago winter. And he had a great trip. And it was all of them were saying it was the best trip they ever had. And they'd gone on so many, and, they all get along great, but, they're brothers. There's be bickering and, here and there and stuff. But they said this trip was awesome. It was amazing. The golf was good. The weather was pretty solid. They had some fun times, had some drinks. And then when he came by my house on Tuesday, he flew back, I should say. He's gone for about a week. And he told my son, my 4-year-old, when I come back, I'm going to bring you Dunkin' Donuts. Because they my dad was their sugar dealer. I was one of those parents before my kids were born where I'm I'm going to make them eat healthy. I'm going to do this and this. And then all the grandparents go, no, you're not. We're going to give them sweets. And then you get over it. Because then you realize, especially now, how much perspective I've gotten from this. Sorry. My train of thought's going to be shit in this episode. But I just figured I'd tell you guys what happened. Talking about it helps. I'll tell you, if I would have tried to do this episode any earlier than today, it would have been a lot of tears. And a lot of you guys wouldn't have wanted that. Because I know you look at me as the toughest of men. You're like, that Joe Kilgallon is one. He's a fucking goddamn Adonis. Look at that beautiful son of a bitch. I know I'm fucking the embodiment of Hercules and Hulk Hogan before he was racist. You know what I mean? Like this kind of unachievable man, you know? Sure, there are people taller and stronger and better looking, maybe, but you combine all of what I got, and it's just nobody wants to see that guy cry, you know? Shatter your world. So that's why doing this episode, I needed the time. Because I'll tell you what, man, I lost a lot of weight, and I think it was just from tears, and I wasn't eating much. But I've gained it back now. Now I'm eating like a goddamn scumbag. A scumbag, just like I'm eating like a child again. I think that's the weirdest thing. To anyone out there who's lost a parent, maybe you could relate to this. My friend, comedian Camilla Clee, she lost her mom a few years back, and she talked about how it makes you feel like a 5-year-old again in a way. And it's so true. You know, you just start thinking about everything your parents mean to you. And I had a great relationship with my dad. We were very close. Since moving back to Chicago in 2017, I lived in LA from 2014 to 2017. But since moving back, I would say I probably saw my dad a couple times a week, at least, from 2017 through. I mean, he was in Florida for about a week, so I didn't see him then. But on average, a couple times a week the last 4 years I was here. And I'm so glad. I mean, I always knew moving back was the right decision, you know? But now I know even more so. You know, because you do. I mentioned perspective a little bit earlier. You gain a lot of perspective when something like this happens. And anyone out there, if you're close with one of your parents, I hope you don't have to go through this for a long, long time. But yeah, you definitely gain a perspective of of what's important. You know, being close to your loved ones and spending time with friends and family and the people who make you feel good. Though, you know, that matters. Jesus Christ, so much shit doesn't matter. Just, you know, I talk a lot about social media on this podcast, and man, what you get a lot of perspective. Just a few days after, I remember scrolling through Twitter. Just as I'm scrolling, I'm like, who cares? Who cares? Who gives a shit? This is what this is what you're on about. This is what you're wasting your time about right now. Are you fucking kidding me? Get some fucking perspective. And I'm not saying don't care about the shit you care about. Don't everyone's got their causes and, you know, you want to be an activist about something. Yeah, those are great things and all that. I'm not knocking that. That's the problem with nowadays. You have to be so fucking clear with people. Well, I'm done wasting my time being clear. If you don't know what the fuck I meant, that shit's on you. I think we all need to have that attitude a little bit instead of having to hold everyone else's hand through your shit. Oh, well, I meant to say was you didn't. What did you think I was being an asshole? When I said, who cares? Did you think I was talking about your specific fucking problems? No, I'm talking about people wasting their fucking time on trivial bullshit. I'm not saying don't have your hobbies. Have your fucking hobbies. I'm still keeping my hobbies, but stop wasting your time talking or arguing with strangers who you'll never fucking meet, who don't matter, who only exist to piss you off. Get rid of that shit. And yeah, you also do need some perspective too. Because there are times I see people arguing where I'm like, oh my God, shut the fuck up, the both of you. Take a step back. It does not matter. I can't give a specific example, but I know as I was scrolling through on different things, trying to take my mind off of things for a minute or two, I felt like, oh God, this is terrible. It really is, man. But yeah, I'm glad my dad, back to, you know, the last week of his life, he was in great mood when we saw him. We were talking about how happy he was to see both Brady and Aaron Rodgers knocked out of the playoffs, because that's what happened that weekend. And it was a great weekend of NFL playoffs. The Super Bowl just happened. Maybe I'll touch on that a little later. I'll do another episode. I think I might release another one. You might get 2 back to back. But I wanted this one to be specific to what's going on in my life. You know, it'd be too weird to have just taken 2 or 3 weeks off, come back to the podcast and just covered the Super Bowl and other random things and not address what I've been going through, you know? And I know it's going to take a long time for me to get over this. Like, how could it not take a long time to get over? Think about this. This was the most important person in my life for 37 years. I'm not going to get over it in a couple weeks. I'm probably not going to get over it in a year. You know, it's you know, I'm going to have, obviously, I'm able to function a little bit more. I wasn't able to function for a while. I canceled a lot of shows. I just went back to stand up this past weekend. I thought, all right, maybe it's time to get off the mat. He wouldn't want me. He probably wouldn't have wanted me to cancel any of the shows. He was always like, take the work. But I am bummed. The last group picture of my dad with my siblings, I missed it because I was doing a show. My younger sister, Colleen, recently got engaged, and it was an engagement party, and I had a show already booked. So there are some things like that going forward in the future where I'm really going to have to weigh it. You know, if it's like a big family event, a family party up against a show that I'm not even the show. Thankfully, the show I did was great, but there have been times in my life where, I mean, obviously I'm not skipping weddings, but there's been times where I've missed a family gathering here or there, or even an important event with my friends to do a show that sucked. And then I kind of had the feeling it was going to suck. Thankfully, I'm at where I'm at in my career where I could start to say no to some of those more bullshitty gigs. You know, I know the game enough where I'm like, okay, do I really need to do this show in some fucking weird town 3 hours away, no hotel? I have to drive 3 hours back afterwards. No, I'm not doing that anymore. This isn't, 7 years ago where it was just like, I'm a comic, I got to fucking do every bullshit thing out there. No, like, because that doesn't get your name out there. That's like the illusion. And I know enough how to develop material where it's not like, oh, I want to go see how it plays in this fucking town to see if it hits well in the major markets. I don't have to do that song and dance anymore, thankfully. So yeah, that's another thing. I'm fuck, man. Time is the most valuable currency. To you longtime listeners, to the people who've been listening in the month of January, every episode in the month of January, I've talked about death. And after this episode, no more of that shit. I hopefully no more. I can't guarantee, but seriously, remember Betty White died just before the new year. And so I mentioned Betty White because it was a big thing, and she got to be 99 and my dad was 67. My dad died at 67. I didn't think, and again, there was no signs of it. He had diabetes, but he was under control. There was nothing that made any of us think, oh, we're really worried about your dad. He doesn't look well. None of that shit. And so, I'm happy he went out peacefully in his recliner. Fuck yeah, he loved that chair. Very Archie Bunker about that chair where it's like, get out of my chair, meathead. That was, everyone knew you don't sit in dad's chair. And so yeah, I'm happy for that. I'm happy it wasn't years of pain and agony like some people unfortunately have to go through. So again, if I can emphasize that, I will. But from the standpoint of me, his son, and his other son, and his two daughters, and his wife, and his brothers and sisters, and everyone who loved him dearly, which there was a lot of us out there, which was great. The wake and funeral had tons and tons of people. Line out the door and almost down the street. It was crazy how many people were there. But we, not to be able to say goodbye, that sucks. We weren't mushy. We weren't like a mushy family, though. Very Irish Catholic in our ways. But, you just want to be able to say, I love you. You're the best. I'm so lucky you're my dad. That kind of thing. But yeah, and then I think about, what if I would have just said that randomly? He'd have been like, what the hell's wrong with you? He'd ask if I was dying. Are you okay? That's just, we say I love you in different ways. Different families do that. And I know he knows. I know he knew. It's fucking weird talking about him in past tense. I named my oldest son. I have two sons. My oldest is named after my dad. Same name, different middle name, but same first name. And obviously last name. Duh, you fucking idiot. No, I'm kidding. Shit, man, he was hilarious, though. He was so funny. Anyone who ever met him talked about that. He really, I consider myself very fortunate. This is something I mentioned in the eulogy. It's a thing you see in television shows and movies where they'll say, you're just like your dad, or you're just like your mom. And then the character is like, how dare you? And they're like all upset about it. Growing up, or even now to this day, when people say you're just like your father, I loved it. I always loved that. Oh, really? I'm just like my favorite person? That's great. And that, when I emphasize him being my favorite person, it's not to say I didn't love everyone else. You know what I mean? I'm very lucky. But I love my mom, and I love my stepmom so much. They're but my dad was there day one. Like my parents got divorced. We lived with my dad. Like my dad was just always, he sacrificed a lot and was just, but man, I really think I've told other comedians this. My comedian friends know this. I've never stolen a joke from another comedian, but I've straight up ripped off jokes from my dad. You know, hanging out. Where I remember when I first started doing stand-up and I moved down, I had my own apartment. You know, my dad's house, my parents' house was usually on the way. So I'd go over to my dad and stepmom's house and hang out there for a little bit. Sometimes I'd grab dinner before I'd go to do shows because they lived like more inwards into the city than I did. And just watching the news with him, just the funny ass shit out of his mouth. Just such a quick wit. So funny. Some dark humor too here or there. I remember when the Boston Marathon bombing happened. Don't take this the wrong way. He was never mean spirited at all, or he hated bullies. But this was just a funny observation. That Boston Marathon bombing happened, and you know this was afternoon. I was over there, and then they said like 3 people have died, and then he was like 3 people. How many people die in a regular marathon? I think at least 1 or 2, right? This isn't even that big of a deal. You know, we're cutting into jeopardy because of this. Come on, you know. It was hilarious to me. I remember one time my older sister was a teacher. I was still living at home. I think I was 21 and she was 23. So she was like in her first or second year teaching. There was a bomb threat at her high school. It's a suburban high school. So she, bomb threat, everyone has to leave and school was cut back, for the day. They only were there till like 10 a.m. So obviously everyone had to go home. And so she decided to, drive into the city to see us. And she said, she walked in. We're like, oh, what the hell are you doing here? Don't you have school? And my sister was like, there was a bomb threat. And, all the parents were picking up the kids. And she says, Dad, it made me think if there was a bomb threat at my high school, would you have come to pick me up? He said, hell no. Why would I drive towards a bomb? And just so quick. Like, and that's hysterical when you think about it. He'd be like, if anything, I would tell you, walk away from the school. I'll pick you up about, 4 or 5 blocks away. Get out of the bomb radius. We don't know how big of this bomb is. How much C4 are they using? Just so damn funny. Watching sports with him was great too, because he was encyclopedia, but he was just very quick to make fun of like the dumb coaches, and if the announcer said something stupid, he'd be all over him for it. Just an insanely funny guy. Wasn't like me in the sense where he liked to be the life of the party. If he knew you, family parties, he would hold court, but he was shy if he didn't know you. He'd say, hi, how you doing? And stuff like that, but he wouldn't go out of his way to be like, hey, what's up? He didn't know people. I remember my sister would bring friends over and he wouldn't even get out of the church. He'd be like, hi, how you doing? I kind of like that too, because you almost, in that sense, you just spend time with the people you like. You kind of, you got to get in. You got to get into the circle in order to get all of my dad, who was just, everyone came by too. They're like, your dad was one of a kind. That phrase, that term, one of a kind, gets thrown around a lot. But when enough people use it over and over again, you realize, oh shit, this is a thing. He really was one of a kind. And then speaking of people saying it enough where you're like, okay, there's got to be something here. I had a lot of babysitters because my parents divorced and we lived with my dad. And so like after school, there'd be a babysitter there because he had to work. And they all said the same thing. There was different ones, of course, during different periods. You'd have one for a couple months and another one for a couple months. A lot of high school girls and some women in their like 20s, I think, maybe some older people too. And I remember anytime I was late coming in, because this is the 90s, you could go run around on the street and run around the neighborhood. If I was like, say I had to be home for 5:30 for dinner. If I walked in at 5:31, 5:32, these babysitters would say to me, do you have any idea what would happen if something happened to you? Your father would kill me. Because I'd be like 2 minutes late. They'd be like, what the hell were you? They'd be all mad. I'm like, relax. What is it? 5:33? Chill. I was a kid. So it's my 10-year-old response. And each one, if something would have happened to you, your father would kill me. And I'm too little to put the dots together. But as I became an adult and I had a flashback to that, I was like, I think he was literally telling them, if something happens to my children, I will kill you. All right, have a good day. There's some money for pizza to order or something, shit, I don't know. It just cracks me up. He was very overprotective in that sense. Didn't like us sleeping over at anyone else's house. When you're a kid, you're like, how can I sleep over at Chris's house? Can I sleep over at Mike's house? No, I bought you a bed. Use it. That's his thing. But it was really just because he didn't want us away from him. And again, when you're a kid, you're a little bit like, what the fuck? But as an adult, who's a father now myself, you appreciate that and you relate. You relate to it. It's like, oh my God, he cared that much about me. He didn't want, I could sleep over my cousins because that was family. And every now and then I was able to get away with it, like if I begged enough. But for the most part, I remember him always being like, I bought you a bed. Use that bed. You don't need to go sleep on your friend's floor. Do they have a bed for you there? I don't think they do. It's just like, what if they cook horrible food, right? What if you don't like what they're serving? All this kind of stuff. He's just a very funny guy like that. Yeah, it's weird, man. It's so weird. I keep looking out the window thinking I'm going to see him walking up because he would pop in. He would pop in. My wife and I have been thinking about moving to like another neighborhood or, some people are like, oh, come out to the suburbs and all that. And, I was considering it even because I've lived in the city limits my whole life. So I'm like, oh, maybe the suburbs because the public schools these days, they close all the time. And, I support the safety measurements, but in the same regard, I feel like they're going to go on strike every year. And it's just such a fucking pain in the ass. But then I thought to myself, no, I can't live in the suburb because my dad's less likely to pop in. I need to live within a certain number of minutes from him so the pop in is there because I like that he would just pop in. But if I live way out, that's not happening anymore. So yeah, those were the things I thought about, and now I'm like, fuck, I don't need to think about it. Yeah, fucking back to that. Then Bob Saget died. I felt, and then I had Erica Nicole Clark on an episode, and we talked about like, who the other celebrity deaths would be. Like basically, what were we talking about? Yeah, like people who are so universally loved, because Betty White and Bob Saget, both their deaths, everyone was like, no, fuck no. We love that guy. We love her. Oh, this sucks. And then Louis Anderson died. He was 69. Bob Saget was 65. My dad was 67. I remember different things. We're going, oh, my dad's right in between them. I'm like, oh, he's doing great though. And then like, I think a week after I had that thought, just fuck, man. I'm just, it just seems like, and I know at 67, he had a great life, 4 successful children, 2 teachers, one's in med school, and a son who's just one of the best looking human beings in the world. Has really good podcast. It's just insanely underrated. So yeah, it's one of those things. You feel for his siblings too. They were all close. I love my aunts and uncles. They're the best. It just makes you want to be around family more. And yeah, here's the thing about the grief too, is you don't, with the grief I'm in right now for my dad's death, I don't want it to go away. It's kind of weird to say it that way, but so many times someone dies. I've had friends die and it always sucks and it always like it hurts, but I've never had the feeling like this before, because I didn't realize what a huge impact my dad had in like the little things. Like if I discover, I'm like, oh, this actor when 15 years ago, different haircut, was in that movie. Oh, that the first person I'd want to talk to about that, my dad. Major sport event. Did you see that fucking call? Yeah, I know that ref sucks. Like, stuff like that. I'm driving through the neighborhood. Oh, they're opening up a new restaurant over there. Oh, man, I can't wait to tell my dad. He's like, oh, cool. We need one of those in this neighborhood. Like, all that stuff is now, those thoughts don't leave my brain. But now I'm like, I think, oh, that'd be something I'd share with my dad. That would be something I'd share with my dad. That would be, and yeah, it sucks. So I don't know. I think I'm gonna become one of those people that starts talking to the sky. As far as not wanting to let go of the grief, when I've had friends die, it feels like everyone gets together and we talk about them and there's the wake and the funeral, and then, we might all get together at a bar and have some drinks, but then it feels like as time goes on, people just stop talking about them. And I know life has to go on. You can't be in sorrow to the point where you can't get out of bed. But in the same regard, I don't want shit to move on. Like, again, this is the most important person in my life for my life. So I don't, my wife and kids are important too, but like, I don't want it to just be another thing where it's like, okay, well, that's that. He's buried. Let's not talk. Let's move. I just don't want that. I tried to soak in as much of it as I could. At the wake, Catholics, we do this thing where it's an open casket, which I've talked around to people who aren't Catholic, and they go, yeah, that shit's weird that you guys do that. but it's the closure you could get. I don't know. I never thought it was weird. When you grow up around something, you just think of it, oh, that's just the way we do it. But I remember just when they closed it the final time, wanting to be in the room, where some people were, some of my siblings, and I totally understand it. We were still struggling, all of us. We're having a really rough go of it right now. And, but I just, in my head, I'm like, I want to see him as much as I can. I just wanted to, spend as much time as possible. Yeah, it's been fucking hard, man. I don't know. Sorry, this has been such a bummer of a fucking podcast. Thank you for listeners for being part of the therapy. But I wanted you guys to know why I haven't done an episode in a few weeks. For those of you, some of you might not follow me on social media and you didn't see the post about it, and that's okay. But yeah, I will go back. I will soldier on. I might share more fun stories if I can remember any fun ones of my dad. He loved a good pun. Yeah, I'll share this one. This is how I opened the eulogy. My sister and I split the duties, my older sister. But this is how I opened my part with one of my dad's favorite jokes. What did the Siamese twins say to their mother? Thank you for joining us. You get it? It's a good dad joke pun right there. It's a classic. You got to like a good classic. Do you guys get it? Because they're Siamese twins. They're connected. They said to their mother, thank you for joining us, because she's the one responsible for them being connected. Now you see, you guys got it because I'd explain it to you. I'm being a silly boy. All right. I'm going to end the podcast there. For all of you who tweeted stuff at me and sent me messages of condolences and everything, I really appreciate all of you. I hope I've said all I could say about it. Just, really focus on the good. I've been trying to focus on the positives. I started to get real heartbroken thinking to myself about like, oh, I always thought when both my kids were at school full day, that's when me and my dad start golfing a lot more together, because we used to golf a lot together. And then, my kids were too little, so someone had to be there to watch them. And we had a good round when we went golfing in August together, though. That was nice. But I just kept thinking to myself, oh, maybe we'll go here one day. We'll go there. I just thought I had more time. I thought I had all the time, and you just don't know when the time is going to end. So get rid of negative people in your life. Lean in the people who you really enjoy. I used to be like one of those people who loved being popular and I wanted to have hundreds of friends. It's such a waste of time. I'm not saying be mean to people and just call up people going, hey, you didn't make the cut. Fuck off, Jimmy, you douche. Like, no, you don't. I'm saying, though, the people you do really love, your close friends, the people who you're pumped up to see, whether they're friends or family, lean into them. Go even harder. You know what I mean? Like, life is short. You're at a freaking Walgreens or a CVS and you see a little keychain that you think your buddy might like, buy it. You know what I mean? Just same thing. Get your mom flowers, get your dad a golf ball. Like, I don't know. I'm thinking about all like the things. So like I in my head, I'm like, man, any accomplishment I have in the future, I'm going to think, fuck, my dad didn't get to see this. And so that started to bum me out. You guys know I've talked about this. I have like a dream of throwing out the first pitch at a Cubs game, which I feel like should be happening soon. If baseball gets it together and has a season, I think I'm due, because I've been at Cubs games where I'm like, I've got more TikTok followers than they do. You know what I mean? I got more of a YouTube presence. I've headlined the clubs around here. Who is this? Some country singer I've never heard of? Why do they get to throw it out? So I've been in a Cubs commercial. I know he loved that. I've been mentioned on Cubs broadcast as a comedian. Thanks to my guy, Ryan Dempster. But I always thought I'm going to throw out the first pitch and I'm going to have my two sons walking out toward the mound with me. They're not going to get on the mound. They're going to stand to the side. Daddy's going to throw a strike. I'm going to throw a little two-seamer, and my dad would also be on the field, because I figured out, I've gone with my friends when Roy Wood Jr. and Steve Byrne got to throw out the first pitch. They brought me on the field with them, because you get to bring about, a little posse, a little entourage. And I thought, oh, it'd be so cool. I'll bring my dad, I'll bring my brother, I'll bring my sons. That's the team. My wife too, if she wants to come, but she loves the baseball. I can't bring like a dozen people, but I figured if I could only bring like a handful, like 4 or 5, that's my crew. And then I thought, like, God, that's probably going to happen this year or soon. And I'll think immediately, like, do I even want to do this now? I started to think that way too. I started thinking, like, Like, who gives a shit if dad's not around to enjoy it? But I'm trying to think like he's watching from high. But then I'm also trying to focus on think about all the cool shit he did get to witness you do, Joe. You know? And most important, and he didn't care. That's the thing. When you're a parent, you don't give a shit. You don't. I've had moments with my kids where I thought to myself, like, if they want to live at home until they're fucking 60, great, because they're with me. That's all you really want at the end of the day, is for them to be healthy and to be near you. You know, you just want to be with them all the time. And I know he didn't care if I was a good stand-up or a bad stand-up, or if I got to, you know, be on TV shows and all that other stuff or whatever. You know, he loved me anyway. It's unconditional love. And I felt the same way towards him. And, you know, again, I named my oldest son. That was my way. I was like, I'm going to name my oldest son after my dad. That's how I'm going to tell him, you did an amazing job and I love you so much. So, all right. Hopefully you guys could take some positive from this. And, you know, thanks for all the support, everybody. It's hard. It's hard for me to talk about this stuff. So, next episode, I'm going to rip a couple shots. My buddy Jonah Jerkins, who's been on the podcast a bunch, he bought me a bottle of Redbreast Irish whiskey. So I'll take a few shots from that so I could go back to being a comedian on this podcast. All right. You guys are the best. Thanks for all the